My name is Samantha Cooper and I'm 32 years old. Since I turned 18, I've saved every spare dollar I earned, growing it to $220,000 through careful investments. Last month, my family emptied every cent of it without my permission to pay off my brother's student loans, buy him a luxury car, and fund his honeymoon. When I called them in shock, my father laughed and said, "Thanks for your naivety. Your family now pay your share." I couldn't stop laughing because the money they took was actually. Before I continue my story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe if you want to hear how I turned this betrayal into something unexpected. Growing up in Portland, Oregon, I was always the responsible one in the Cooper family. Our household was solidly middle class. My father, Walter, worked as an accountant at a local firm, while my mother, Diana, taught third grade at Portland Elementary. We lived in a modest 3-bedroom house in a decent neighborhood, with just enough space for my parents, myself, and my younger brother, Ethan. From the beginning, it was clear Ethan was the golden child. 3 years younger than me, he had a charismatic personality that drew people in immediately. My parents beamed with pride at everything he did: his little league games, his school plays, even his mediocre report cards. "He's just a natural people person," my mother would say. "He'll go so far in life with that charm." I was different. Quieter, more analytical, preferring books. This pattern continued throughout our childhood. I learned early that I needed to be self-sufficient. My grandmother, Martha, my father's mother, noticed this disparity and took a special interest in me. During summer visits to her small farm outside Portland, she taught me about financial independence. "A woman must always have her own money," Grandma Martha would tell me as she balanced her checkbook at the kitchen table. "Don't ever put yourself in a position where you have to ask for what's rightfully yours." I got my first job at 16, working weekends at a local bookstore. Unlike my friends who spent their paychecks on clothes and movies, I saved nearly everything. By 18, I had amassed $3,000, not a fortune, but a solid start. Meanwhile, Ethan continued being Ethan. He never held a job through high school, instead focusing on being popular and playing baseball. My parents funded his car, his phone, his social activities. "Your brother needs these things to develop properly," my mother explained when I questioned the discrepancy. "You're naturally independent." After high school, I attended Portland State University on a partial scholarship, working part-time to cover the rest of my expenses. I majored in computer science, recognizing the growing opportunities in the field. Even then, I maintained my strict saving habits, putting away 30% of everything I earned. Ethan, predictably, got into a prestigious private university across the country with no scholarship. My parents drained their savings and took out loans to send him there, never questioning the wisdom of this financial decision. "He needs the connections that school will provide," my father insisted. During college, my relationship with my grandparents deepened. My grandfather Joseph, a retired investment banker, taught me the fundamentals of investing. "Start small, but start now," he advised. "Compound interest is the 8th wonder of the world." Following his guidance, I began investing modest amounts in index funds, blue-chip stocks, and eventually, a few carefully researched growth companies. Nothing risky, nothing flashy, just consistent, disciplined investing. After graduation, I took a job with a tech company in Seattle. The distance from Portland, a 3-hour drive, felt necessary. I needed space from my family's dynamics, from always feeling secondary. In Seattle, I was judged solely on my own merits. My analytical skills and work ethic quickly earned me recognition and promotions. As my income increased, my investment strategy grew more sophisticated. I lived well below my means, renting a modest 1-bedroom apartment and driving a reliable used car. My colleagues splurged on luxury condos and fancy restaurants, but I stayed focused on my long-term goals. By 25, my savings and investments had grown to $50,000. By 30, it reached $150,000. During those years, my contact with my family became increasingly limited. I returned to Portland for major holidays and occasional weekend visits, but these interactions were often strained. Family conversations revolved around Ethan's latest achievements: his graduation, his first job at a marketing firm, his promotion, his relationships. My accomplishments were footnotes, if mentioned at all. When I was promoted to senior developer, my mother's response was, "That's nice, dear. Did you hear Ethan might be getting engaged soon?" Through all this, I maintained a cordial relationship with my family. I didn't harbor resentment, I simply accepted that this was how things were. I built a life I was proud of, with good friends, fulfilling work, and growing financial security. By 32, my primary investment account contained exactly $220,000, the result of 14 years of disciplined saving and smart investing. What my family didn't know was that this wasn't my only account. Following my grandfather's advice about diversification, I had established several investment vehicles. My primary account was just one piece of a larger financial strategy. But this was information I kept private, not out of secrecy, but because financial discussions weren't welcomed in my family unless they revolved around Ethan's needs or achievements. Looking back, I should have recognized the warning signs. The increasingly frequent calls from my parents asking about my financial situation, my mother's pointed comments about family responsibility and sharing blessings, Ethan's sudden interest in my career and lifestyle. But I was so accustomed to emotional distance from my family that I didn't see what was coming: a betrayal that would shatter whatever relationship we still had. The call came on a rainy Tuesday evening in March. I had just finished a grueling day at work, dealing with a critical software bug that had taken hours to resolve. Exhausted, I was looking forward to a quiet evening with takeout and a new mystery novel when my phone lit up with my mother's number. "Samantha, we need you to come home," my mother said without preamble. Her voice carried an urgency I hadn't heard before. "It's a family emergency." My stomach dropped. "Is everyone okay? Grandma and Grandpa?" "They're fine," she said quickly. "But we need to discuss something important. In person. This weekend." After some back and forth, I agreed to drive down to Portland that Saturday. My mother was uncharacteristically vague about the nature of the emergency, which left me anxious during the 3-hour drive south. When I arrived at my childhood home, the scene seemed oddly normal. My father was watching golf in the living room, my mother was preparing lunch, and there were no signs of the emergency I'd been led to expect. Ethan arrived shortly after me, giving our mother an extended hug before offering me a quick nod. We settled around the dining table, the site of so many family discussions over the years. My father cleared his throat, a signal that he was taking the lead. "Samantha, we've called you here because we're facing a family situation," he began formally. "Ethan has recently received some troubling news about his student loans." I looked at my brother, who suddenly seemed very interested in his water glass. "What kind of troubling news?" I asked. My mother jumped in. "The interest rates have increased substantially. The total amount has grown to nearly $150,000. It's become unmanageable." I blinked, trying to process this information. "That's unfortunate, but how is this a family emergency?" "Because we're family," my father said firmly. "And in this family, we help each other." The conversation that followed was a masterclass in subtle manipulation. My parents detailed how Ethan's debt was preventing him from moving forward in life, how the burden was causing him stress and anxiety, how he couldn't possibly afford to marry his girlfriend Heather with this financial cloud hanging over him. Throughout this explanation, my financial situation was repeatedly referenced. "We know you've done well for yourself in Seattle," my mother said, with an emphasis that suggested my success was somehow separate from the family's identity. "You've always been so good with money, Samantha." "We're not asking for handouts," my father added, though it was becoming increasingly clear that this was exactly what was happening. "We're talking about family responsibility." I sat in stunned silence as the true purpose of this emergency meeting became clear. They wanted me to help pay off Ethan's student loans that had funded his education at an expensive private university, his off-campus apartment, and, from what I gathered, quite an active social life. I need to think about this, I said finally. This is a lot to process. Of course, my mother said, patting my hand condescendingly. Take all the time you need. But Ethan and Heather are hoping to get engaged soon, and it would be wonderful to resolve this before then. That evening, my parents hosted a dinner that included Heather and her parents. Throughout the meal, Ethan and Heather exchanged meaningful glances, and finally, Ethan clinked his glass for attention. Since we're all here together, he announced, beaming at Heather, we wanted to share some news. Last night, I asked Heather to marry me, and she said yes. The table erupted in congratulations and excitement, my parents practically glowing with pride. I offered my congratulations too, genuinely happy for my brother despite the uncomfortable financial conversation earlier. As the celebration continued, my father pulled me aside into his home office. This is why we need to handle Ethan's situation quickly, he said in a low voice. They want to start their life together without this burden. You understand, don't you, Samantha? Dad, I support Ethan's happiness, but $150,000 is a significant amount. I can't just write a check. His expression hardened slightly. No one's asking you to write a check for the full amount. But you could help. Substantially. You don't have the expenses. Ethan has no relationship, no plans for a family. The implication stung, but I kept my composure. I'll consider what I can do to help. But I need to look at my own finances first. That's all we ask, he said, his tone suggesting that my agreement was a foregone conclusion. Later that night, unable to sleep in my old bedroom, I went downstairs for a glass of water. As I approached the kitchen, I heard hushed voices coming from the living room. I paused in the hallway, not intending to eavesdrop, but my own name caught my attention. Samantha won't just hand over the money, my father was saying. But there might be another way. Walter, I don't know about this, my mother replied, sounding uncertain. Diana, she has over $200,000 sitting in that account. She told me herself last Christmas, after those 2 glasses of wine. Money just sitting there while Ethan struggles. But accessing her account without permission. It's not without permission if we're just helping her do what she should do anyway. She's family. This is what family does. I froze, unable to believe what I was hearing. They were actually discussing accessing my accounts without my knowledge or consent. I retreated silently to my room, heart pounding. The next morning, I made an excuse about an urgent work matter and left Portland earlier than planned. During the drive back to Seattle, my mind raced with what I had overheard. Surely my parents wouldn't actually attempt to access my accounts. They were just venting frustration, right? But the conversation had revealed something important. They knew about my primary investment account, and they knew roughly how much was in it. Information I had shared in an unguarded moment during a holiday gathering. As soon as I returned to my apartment, I called my bank and investment firm to add extra security measures to all my accounts. New passwords, new security questions, 2-factor authentication, every protection I could think of. I also called my grandparents, careful to avoid alarming them while seeking advice. Trust your instincts, Samantha, my grandfather said gravely when I described feeling pressured about family financial obligations. Your money is yours. You earned it. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. His words strengthened my resolve. I decided to limit contact with my parents for a while, giving myself space to process what had happened and decide how to move forward. Little did I know that this was just the beginning of a betrayal that would fundamentally change my understanding of family. 3 weeks after my hasty departure from Portland, I returned home from work to find my father Walter sitting in the lobby of my apartment building. The sight of him there, so out of place in his worn blazer and casual slacks, sent an immediate wave of anxiety through me. Dad? What are you doing in Seattle? I asked, unable to mask my surprise. Can't a father visit his daughter? He replied with forced joviality. I was in the area for a conference and thought we could have dinner. This explanation immediately rang false. My father rarely traveled for work, and he had never once visited me in Seattle in the 10 years I'd lived there. Nevertheless, I agreed to dinner at a nearby restaurant, curious about his real motivation. Over pasta and wine, Walter maintained small talk for approximately 20 minutes before getting to his point. Samantha, I've been thinking about your financial planning, he said, attempting to sound casual. With my background in accounting, I could help you optimize your tax situation if you showed me your accounts. Family helping family. I nearly choked on my wine. That's generous, Dad, but I have a financial advisor who handles that for me. His expression darkened slightly. A professional? They charge excessive fees, Samantha. Unnecessary expenses. I'm comfortable with the arrangement, I replied firmly. After several more attempts to get me to share account details, Walter grew increasingly frustrated. By dessert, he abandoned subtlety altogether. This is about Ethan, isn't it? You've always been jealous of him. Always competing. Dad, that's not fair. This is about my personal financial boundaries, not Ethan. Family doesn't have boundaries, Samantha. Family shares. Your mother and I gave you everything growing up. I paid the bills shortly after, and we parted ways with tension thick between us. That night, I received 5 text messages from my mother, each more emotionally manipulative than the last. Your father is heartbroken by your selfishness. We never raised you to be so cold. Ethan would help if the situation were reversed. Is money really more important than family? I can't sleep knowing my daughter has become so callous. The barrage continued over the following weeks. Calls from my mother turned into hours-long guilt sessions. My father sent emails with links to articles about family financial support and inheritance etiquette. Even my aunts and uncles began calling, clearly having heard a one-sided version of the situation. Then came the call from Ethan himself. Unlike our parents, he approached the topic with apparent understanding. Sam, I want you to know I didn't ask them to pressure you, he said, his voice carrying that familiar charismatic warmth. This whole student loan situation is stressing me out, but that's my problem, not yours. For a moment, I felt a connection with my brother that had been missing for years. Thanks, Ethan. I appreciate that. Of course, he continued smoothly. Though, between us, I am worried about how this affects my future with Heather. Her parents are traditional, you know? They expect me to provide for her, and this debt makes that impossible. And there it was, the guilt trip, just packaged more skillfully than our parents' approach. Ethan, I sympathize with your situation, but... No, I get it, he interrupted. You worked hard for your money. Though it's not like you have a family to support or anything. Anyway, don't worry about it. I'll figure something out. The call ended shortly after, leaving me feeling manipulated and angry. The next day, Heather called me directly, something that had never happened before. Samantha, I hope you don't mind me reaching out, she began sweetly. I just wanted to say I understand your position completely. Financial independence is so important for women, isn't it? That's actually why I admire you so much. Her approach was even more sophisticated than Ethan's, present herself as an ally before pivoting to the ask. Ethan doesn't know I'm calling you, she continued. He's so proud, you know? He would never admit how much this debt is crushing him. Yesterday, I found him looking at engagement ring return policies. It broke my heart. I remained silent, recognizing the emotional manipulation for what it was. Anyway, Heather concluded when I didn't respond as expected. I just thought you should know how things really are. No pressure at all, of course. A week later, while checking my credit report as part of my regular financial maintenance, I discovered something alarming: multiple attempts to open new credit accounts in my name. The applications had been rejected due to security freezes I had placed years ago, but the attempts themselves were deeply concerning. I called the credit bureau. That evening, I contacted a lawyer friend, Jessica, who specialized in financial fraud. Her advice was unequivocal. This crosses every line, Sam. Family or not, what they're attempting is criminal. You need to protect yourself. Following Jessica's recommendation, I changed banks entirely, moving my accounts to a national institution with no presence in Portland. I created new email addresses for financial communications, changed all passwords and security questions, and placed additional fraud alerts on my credit reports. For several weeks after these changes, things quieted down. I immersed myself in a major project at work, grateful for the distraction. The relative peace led me to believe that perhaps my parents had accepted my boundaries and moved on. Then came the text from my mother. We're having a small graduation celebration for Ethan this Saturday. He completed his MBA online. Would mean the world to him if you came. Against my better judgment, I agreed to attend. Ethan earning an MBA was significant. Perhaps this event would allow us to reset our family dynamics on a more positive note. What I didn't expect was to find 8 family members, including my grandparents, aunts, and uncles, waiting in my apartment lobby when I returned from work that Friday evening. Surprise, my mother called out. We thought we'd come to you instead. A Seattle weekend for the whole family. My grandfather Joseph caught my eye, giving me a subtle look that told me he hadn't been informed of the real purpose behind this surprise visit. My grandmother Martha squeezed my hand in greeting, whispering, "Something's not right here, Samantha. Be careful." What followed was a weekend of intensifying pressure disguised as family bonding. Every conversation circled back to Ethan's achievements, his upcoming wedding, and the unfortunate financial situation preventing his happiness. My apartment, my private space, had been invaded by a coordinated campaign to wear down my resistance. Sunday evening, as the family prepared to return to Portland, my father took me aside on my small balcony. This is your last chance to do the right thing voluntarily, Samantha, he said quietly. For the family. Is that a threat, Dad? I asked, genuinely shocked. He smiled thinly. Just a reality check. Family takes care of family. One way or another. As I watched them drive away, I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the Seattle evening air. The message was clear: they weren't giving up. And they were prepared to escalate further. 2 months after the surprise family invasion of my apartment, I received an elegantly designed digital invitation to Ethan's MBA graduation celebration in Portland. Despite my misgivings, I decided to attend. My grandparents would be there, and regardless of my issues with my parents and brother, I wanted to maintain that relationship. I requested a week off work, something I rarely did. My boss Angela was surprised but supportive. You definitely have the time accumulated, she said. Maybe some family time is exactly what you need. If only she knew. The drive to Portland felt different this time. Spring had fully blossomed, painting the Pacific Northwest in vibrant greens and colorful wildflowers. Under different circumstances, I might have enjoyed the scenic journey. Instead, my hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, my mind racing with contingency plans and exit strategies. When I arrived at my parents' house, the reception was unexpectedly warm. My mother embraced me with genuine enthusiasm. My father clapped me on the shoulder affectionately, and even Ethan seemed genuinely pleased to see me. The prodigal sister returns, he joked, giving me a brief hug. Thanks for coming, Sam. It means a lot. Heather was there too. That evening, my mother prepared my favorite meal, her special lasagna with garlic bread, something she hadn't done since I was in high school. The conversation flowed easily, focusing on neutral topics like local Portland news and my grandparents' recent cruise to Alaska. This is nice, my mother said, looking around the table with misty eyes. Having everyone together like this. I found myself relaxing slightly. Maybe I had overreacted. Maybe the pressure and manipulation had been a temporary aberration, and we could rebuild our relationship on healthier terms. After dinner, as we moved to the living room for coffee and dessert, Ethan asked about my work in Seattle. This was unusual. He rarely showed interest in my career. It's going well, I said cautiously. We just launched a major project that I've been leading. That's amazing, Sam, he said, sounding genuinely impressed. You always were the smart one. The conversation shifted to investments, with my father mentioning some stock he'd purchased that was performing well. Speaking of investments, under normal circumstances, I would have deflected. Financial details weren't something I shared freely, especially given recent events. But the warmth of the evening, the sense of family I'd been missing, lowered my guard. I explained my investment approach in general terms at first, but as my family showed increasing interest, I elaborated on specific funds and companies I'd invested in, the balanced portfolio I'd built, and how consistent contributions had grown my nest egg over time. That's really impressive, Heather. I'd sign up, my mother added, refilling my coffee cup. Would anyone like more cake? Samantha, you've barely touched yours. I took a few bites of the chocolate cake, noticing a slightly bitter aftertaste that I attributed to dark chocolate. Within an hour, I began feeling strangely drowsy and disoriented. I think I need to lie down, I mumbled, struggling to keep my eyes open. Not feeling well suddenly. Let me help you upstairs, my mother said, exchanging a glance with my father that, even in my increasingly foggy state, registered as significant. The next 36 hours exist in my memory as fragmented, hazy snippets. Waking briefly to see my mother checking on me. Attempting to reach for my phone, but finding it missing from the nightstand. Trying to stand but feeling the room spin violently around me. When I finally regained full consciousness, sunlight was streaming through the guest room window. My mouth felt like cotton, my head pounded relentlessly, and a sense of wrongness permeated everything. I located my phone plugged in across the room, not where I would have placed it. The date displayed made me gasp. I had lost nearly 2 full days. With trembling hands, I opened my banking app. The authentication failed. I tried again with the same result. After the third attempt, I used the forgot password option, which sent a verification code to my email. When I accessed my email, I found dozens of notifications from my bank and investment firm, all bearing the same devastating message: account access, password changes, transaction authorizations. With growing horror, I completed the password reset process and logged into my accounts. The balance of my primary investment account, which had contained $220,000 just days earlier, now showed zero. A series of transfers had emptied it completely. I stumbled downstairs, still dizzy and disoriented, to find the house empty except for a note on the kitchen counter in my mother's handwriting. Samantha, we had to make an executive family decision. Ethan's debt has been settled, and we've secured his future with Heather with appropriate transportation and a honeymoon befitting their status. As the successful one in the family, your contribution maintains the family's unity and prospects. We've gone to brunch with the wedding party. There's coffee in the pot. Love, Mom and Dad. Attached to the note was a printout of the transactions. $150,000, student loan payoff. $40,000, reliable luxury transportation for growing family. $30,000, honeymoon and new beginnings fund. With shaking hands, I called my father's cell phone. He answered on the third ring, ambient restaurant noise in the background. Sleeping Beauty awakens, he said jovially. Feeling better? You stole from me, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Now, Samantha, that's a harsh characterization of a family reallocation. We're all in this together. You drugged me and stole my money. I prefer to think of it as helping you do what you should have done willingly, he replied, his tone hardening. Thanks for your naivety, by the way. Using the same password patterns for multiple accounts made things much simpler. Your family now pay your share. The call ended with the cheerful sounds of clinking glasses and laughter. I sat at the kitchen table, the room spinning around me for more than just the lingering effects of whatever they had given me. The betrayal was absolute. My own family had drugged me, accessed my accounts without permission, and stolen my life savings, all while celebrating their actions as appropriate and justified. In that moment, as the full reality of what had happened washed over me, something unexpected happened. I started laughing, not from humor, but from the absurd shock of it all. The laughter turned to sobs, then back to laughter, in a cycle of disbelief and grief. Because what my family didn't know, what they couldn't have known, was that the money they had stolen was actually just a portion of my total savings. And their actions had just severed any obligation I might have felt to protect them from the consequences of their choices. After the initial shock subsided, I moved with decisive clarity. First, I called my grandparents, who arrived at my parents' house within 30 minutes, alarm evident on their faces. "They drugged you," my grandmother repeated, horror in her voice as I explained what had happened. "Your own parents?" "And stole $220,000, I confirmed, showing them the transaction records on my phone. My grandfather's face turned an alarming shade of red. "This is criminal. Absolutely criminal." With their support, I made 2 critical calls. The first was to Jessica, my lawyer friend in Seattle, who immediately began the process of documenting the theft and preparing legal options. The second was to the local police department to report the crime. "Do you want us to come with you to the station?" my grandmother asked, holding my still trembling hand. "Yes, please," I said, grateful for their unwavering support. "But first, I need to secure what's left of my finances." Using my grandparents' computer, I accessed my other accounts, the ones my family knew nothing about, and confirmed they remained untouched. Following Jessica's advice, I moved these funds to entirely new accounts at different institutions, with security measures that would make Fort Knox seem accessible. At the police station, Officer Daniels listened carefully as I detailed the events of the past few days, taking extensive notes and recording my statement. The evidence was substantial transaction records showing unauthorized transfers, medical symptoms consistent with certain sedatives, and the explicit note left by my parents acknowledging their actions. "Ms. Cooper, what your family did constitutes several serious crimes," Officer Daniels explained. "Theft, unauthorized access to financial accounts, and potentially assault if we can prove they deliberately drugged you. I'll need to involve detectives from our financial crimes unit." By late afternoon, Detective Rachel Morgan had taken over the case, her expression grim as she reviewed the evidence. "Family financial crimes are unfortunately common," she told me. "But the scale and premeditation here are exceptional. We'll need to move quickly to preserve evidence and potentially recover funds." While at the station, I received a text from Ethan. "Mom says you're making a scene. Can we talk about this like adults?" I showed the message to Detective Morgan, who advised against responding, and the next morning brought a flurry of activity. Detective Morgan called to inform me they were obtaining warrants for my parents' and brother's financial records. Jessica had filed emergency legal motions to freeze assets related to the stolen funds, and my grandparents had reached out to other family members to inform them of the situation, a difficult but necessary step to prevent my parents from controlling the narrative. Shortly after noon, my phone exploded with notifications. First came angry texts from my father. "How dare you involve the police in a family matter? You've always been selfish. Your mother is in tears. I hope you're satisfied." Then came calls from various family members, some expressing shock and support for me, others berating me for tearing the family apart over money. The division wasn't surprising, but it still hurt. Most revealing was the message from Heather. Ethan had no idea where the money for his loans came from. "Don't punish him for your parents' actions." This particular message caught my attention. If true, it suggested a fracture I could potentially leverage. 3 days after filing the police report, with search warrants executed and preliminary financial investigations underway, I decided it was time for a direct confrontation. Jessica advised against it, but I insisted on facing my family with the evidence of their betrayal. "At least let me come with you," she urged. I agreed, recognizing the value of having both legal representation and a witness present. We arranged to meet at my parents' house, with Detective Morgan informed of our plans. When we arrived, I was surprised to find not just my parents and Ethan, but also Heather and her parents, along with two of my uncles, my father's brothers. "What is this, a family intervention?" I asked as Jessica and I entered the tense living room. "We're trying to resolve the situation before you make an even bigger mistake," my father replied, his tone condescending. "This is still salvageable if you drop these ridiculous accusations." Jessica introduced herself formally. "I'm Jessica Winters, Ms. Cooper's attorney. I should inform everyone present that this conversation may be used in both criminal and civil proceedings." My mother burst into tears, a performance I had seen countless times growing up. "Samantha, how could you do this to us? To your brother? We're your family." "You drugged me and stole my money," I stated flatly. "That's not what family does." "Drugged you? That's absurd," my father scoffed. "You were tired and took a nap. Then you gave us permission to help with your accounts. Don't you remember our conversation?" This gaslighting attempt was so blatant that I nearly laughed again. Instead, I opened my bag and removed a folder of documents, placing them on the coffee table. "Let's review the facts," I said calmly. I laid out printouts of the transaction records, a copy of the note in my mother's handwriting, and medical test results showing traces of a sedative in my system from tests Detective Morgan had arranged. "You've made some very serious allegations, young lady," one of my uncles interjected. "Walter and Diana would never do such things." "Actually, Uncle Peter, they would and did," I replied. "And there's more." I produced copies of the credit applications submitted in my name using my parents' address, the identity theft attempts from months earlier. This pattern of behavior. The room fell silent as the evidence mounted. Ethan, who had been unusually quiet, finally spoke. "Mom, Dad, is this true? Did you drug Sam?" His face had drained of color. "Did you steal her money for my loans?" My mother's tears stopped abruptly as she realized the narrative was slipping from her control. "We did what was necessary for this family. Samantha has always had more than she needs. She wasn't using that money for anything important. It wasn't yours to take," I exclaimed, my composure finally cracking. "That money represented 14 years of work and sacrifice." "You see how selfish she is?" my father said to the room. "All those years of providing for her, and she can't make one sacrifice for her brother." Jessica intervened. "Mr. Cooper, characterizing theft of $220,000 as one sacrifice is both disingenuous and legally irrelevant. The unauthorized access of Ms. Cooper's accounts is a federal crime." Heather's father, a man I had met only twice before, stood up. "I think we should leave. This appears to be headed toward criminal charges, and we don't want to be involved." "Sit down, Richard," my father ordered. "This concerns your daughter, too. That money paid for her honeymoon." "A honeymoon we never asked for," Heather blurted out, surprising everyone. "Ethan and I were planning something simple. We never wanted any of this." As the room erupted into argument, I noticed Ethan staring at the financial documents on the table, a look of genuine horror dawning on his face as he realized the extent of what our parents had done. "I had no idea," he said quietly, looking up at me. "Sam, I swear I didn't know they stole from you. They told me they had been saving for my education all along." In that moment, I saw my brother clearly for perhaps the first time in our adult lives, not the golden child, not my rival, but another victim of our parents' manipulations, albeit in a very different way. "You have 24 hours, I announced to the room, cutting through the chaos. 24 hours to return every cent that was taken from my account. After that, I will proceed with both criminal charges and a civil lawsuit to recover the funds, with interest and punitive damages." My father laughed dismissively. "You're bluffing. You won't follow through with charges against your own parents." I met his gaze steadily. "You stopped being parents the moment you decided to drug and rob your daughter. 24 hours. As Jessica and I turned to leave, my mother called out, "If you do this, you're no longer part of this family. Do you understand what you're throwing away?" I paused at the door. I understand exactly what I'm walking away from. And it's no loss at all. The ultimatum hung in the air as we left, my parents' stunned faces evidence that they had never anticipated this level of resistance. They had always counted on my compliance, my desire for family approval. They had fatally misjudged me, and now they would face the consequences of that miscalculation. The 24-hour deadline passed without any funds being returned to my account. True to my word, I gave Detective Morgan the green light to proceed with the full criminal investigation. Simultaneously, Jessica filed a comprehensive civil suit against my parents and, reluctantly, Ethan, though the complaint made clear his role was potentially unwitting. What happened next unfolded with a swiftness that surprised even me. Detective Morgan's investigation revealed that my parents had been planning this theft for months. Their computers contained searches for how to access accounts without authorization, information about sedatives and their detection times, and even calculations of how much they believed I had saved. Most damning was an email exchange between my parents and Heather, not Ethan, discussing how to extract financial information from me during the graduation celebration. Heather had been complicit in the drugging, suggesting the chocolate cake as the vehicle since Samantha always had a sweet tooth. 3 weeks after our confrontation, arrest warrants were issued for both my parents on multiple felony charges: grand theft, unauthorized access to financial accounts, assault, and conspiracy. The evidence was overwhelming, leaving no room for the family misunderstanding defense they had attempted to construct. Local media picked up the story, parents drug and rob successful daughter to pay son's debts, creating a small sensation in Portland. My father's accounting firm placed him on indefinite leave pending the outcome of the criminal case. My mother was asked to resign from her teaching position after 27 years. Throughout this period, I remained in Seattle, focusing on my work and healing from the betrayal. I declined all interview requests and limited my communication to necessary legal interactions. My grandparents provided regular updates on the family fallout, which was substantial and growing. 6 weeks after the arrests, I received an unexpected visitor at my apartment. Ethan, looking haggard and humbled. "Can we talk?" he asked when I opened the door. "Just for a few minutes." I let him in, maintaining a careful emotional distance as he sat awkwardly on the edge of my sofa. "First, I want you to know I've returned the car," he began. "It wasn't much toward what they took from you, but it's a start. About $40,000. I nodded, waiting for him to continue. "The honeymoon's canceled too. Actually, the whole wedding is off." "Heather," he trailed off, then gathered himself. "After I found out she helped drug you, I couldn't look at her the same way. Then when her parents realized they might be connected to criminal charges, they pressured her to end things." "I'm sorry about the wedding," I said, surprised to find I meant it. "Don't be. It showed me who she really was." He met my eyes directly. "Just like this whole thing showed me who our parents really are. And who I've been." The conversation that followed was the most honest exchange we'd ever had. Ethan acknowledged how he had benefited from our parents' favoritism his entire life, often at my expense. He admitted to manipulating situations to maintain his preferential status. And he expressed genuine remorse for his role in the events that led to the theft, even if he hadn't known the specifics of their plan. "I should have questioned where the money came from," he said. "Deep down, I think I knew something wasn't right. I just didn't want to look too closely." Before he left, Ethan asked a question that caught me off guard. "The $220,000 they took. Was that all you had?" I considered how to respond, then decided on honesty. "No, Ethan. It wasn't." His eyes widened slightly. "How much more?" "Enough," I said simply. The account they emptied was just one part of my overall financial strategy. My grandfather taught me about diversification, never keeping all your assets in one place. "So you have other accounts they didn't know about?" I nodded. A slow smile spread across his face, not malicious, but appreciative. You know what? That's the most badass thing I've ever heard. They thought they were taking everything, but you were 10 steps ahead. After Ethan left, I received a call. It's a generous offer, Jessica explained. The DA thinks a judge would likely sentence them to at least 2 years otherwise, given the premeditation. What happens to the money they've already spent? I asked. The student loans are paid off, right? Yes, and that money can't be recovered. But they own their house outright, worth about $300,000 in today's market. They'll have to sell it to make restitution. The irony wasn't lost on me. My parents would lose their home to pay me back, while Ethan's debt, the supposed reason for this whole disaster, would remain cleared. It wasn't the outcome I had sought, but it felt like appropriate justice. 2 days later, I received a formal letter from my parents' new attorney, accepting the plea deal terms and acknowledging the theft of $220,000 plus applicable interest. The letter was coldly professional, with no personal message attached, a fitting end to our relationship. What my parents and brother never discovered was the true extent of my finances. While they had indeed stolen my primary investment account containing $220,000, this represented only about 11% of my total assets. Over the years, following my grandfather's advice about diversification, I had established multiple investment vehicles across different institutions. My actual net worth at the time of the theft was approximately $1.8 million, the result of aggressive saving, strategic investing in tech stocks during key growth periods, and 2 particularly successful early-stage investments in startups that had gone public. I had never discussed these investments with my family, not out of secrecy, but because financial success wasn't valued in our family dynamic unless it was Ethan's. My achievements had always been minimized, so I had simply stopped sharing them. The irony of my parents risking their freedom and reputation to steal what amounted to a small fraction of my actual wealth wasn't something I took pleasure in. Instead, it reinforced the fundamental lesson of this painful experience. True family is built on mutual respect and support, not blood relation alone. As the legal proceedings continued, I made one final significant decision. I established a conditional trust for Ethan with $50,000 accessible only after he completed financial counseling and maintained full-time employment for 1 year. Not a gift, but a structured opportunity to rebuild his life on healthier terms. Why would you help me at all after what happened? He asked when I informed him of the trust. Because breaking cycles is more important than punishment, I replied. And because you're showing you want to change. The money my parents had stolen would eventually be returned through the court-ordered restitution. But the trust one had in them was gone forever, replaced by boundaries I should have established years earlier. Sometimes the most valuable things stolen can never be truly recovered, but they can be replaced with something stronger and more resilient. The aftermath of family betrayal leaves wounds that time alone cannot heal. For months after the legal proceedings concluded, I experienced nightmares about being drugged, panic attacks when checking my financial accounts, and a pervasive distrust of others that affected every relationship in my life. What you're experiencing is trauma, explained Dr. Marshall, the therapist I began seeing weekly. Your sense of safety was violated by the people evolutionarily programmed to protect you. That creates a profound psychological wound. Our sessions became a lifeline as I navigated the complex emotions surrounding the betrayal. Anger dominated, initially fierce, consuming rage that sometimes left me breathless. This gradually gave way to grief, not just for the money that had been taken, but for the family I had never truly had. You're mourning an illusion, Dr. Marshall observed during our 3rd month of therapy. The supportive family you deserved but never received. This framing helped me process my emotions more productively. I wasn't losing something I had, I was acknowledging something that had never existed. My parents had always viewed me as a resource rather than a daughter. Ethan had been both their golden child and their victim, shaped by their distorted values into someone who expected the world to accommodate his needs. As the court-ordered sale of my parents' house proceeded, I received no direct communication from them, only formal updates through attorneys. The restitution process would eventually return my stolen funds, but the relationship was irreparably severed. I felt no desire to reconcile, a position that some friends found difficult to understand. "But they're your parents," my colleague Michael said over lunch one day. "Don't you think someday you'll want to repair things? Would you maintain a relationship with someone who drugged and robbed you?" I asked simply, "Why would sharing DNA change that equation?" He had no answer. In contrast to the void left by cutting ties with my parents, my relationship with my grandparents deepened. They had stood by me unwaveringly throughout the ordeal, their moral clarity a beacon during the darkest moments. "You know, we always saw how they treated you," my grandmother admitted during a weekend visit to Seattle. "We tried to compensate by giving you extra attention, but perhaps we should have confronted them directly about their favoritism." "You gave me what I needed most," I assured her. A model of integrity and unconditional love. 6 months after the theft, I received an unexpected email from Ethan. He had moved to Chicago, found entry-level work at a marketing firm, and enrolled in financial counseling as stipulated by the trust one had established. His message was free from the manipulation that had characterized our previous interactions. "I'm starting to understand how warped our family dynamic was," he wrote. "I'm sorry for my role in it and for taking so long to see it clearly. I don't expect forgiveness, but I wanted you to know I'm trying to become someone better." His accountability was a surprise and a welcome one. After careful consideration, I responded with cautious openness, establishing clear boundaries, but leaving the door ajar for a potentially healthier relationship in the future. As my personal healing progressed, I felt increasingly drawn to transform my experience into something meaningful for others. Using some of my investment income, I developed a financial literacy program specifically for young women, focusing on financial independence as a cornerstone of personal security. Financial vulnerability is often the thread that keeps people in toxic relationships, I explained to the first group of participants, 20 women ranging from 18 to 25. "My goal is to help you build a foundation that can weather any storm, including those created by the people closest to you." The program expanded. 1 year after the theft, Ethan fulfilled the conditions of the trust one had established. We met in Seattle to complete the paperwork, our first face-to-face meeting since his unexpected visit following the arrests. "You look well," I observed, noting the absence of the desperate edge that had always characterized him. "Chicago agrees with you." "Starting over was exactly what I needed," he replied. "No one there knows me as the golden child or expects me to be anything except who I am today." We spoke for hours, rebuilding a connection that felt entirely new, not weighted by the dysfunctional patterns of our childhood. Ethan shared that he had initiated minimal contact with our parents, maintaining strict boundaries around what he would discuss or engage with. "They haven't really changed," he said. "They still talk about what you did to them, not what they did to you. The narrative is completely reversed in their minds." "That doesn't surprise me," I replied. "Their worldview depends on being the victims, not the perpetrators." As we parted, Ethan asked if I thought we would ever be a family again, the four of us. "No," I said honestly. "But maybe you and I can build something better. Something based on mutual respect and genuine care." He nodded, understanding the truth of it. 2 years after, my investment portfolio continued to grow, eventually surpassing $2 million. The security it provided wasn't just financial, it was emotional armor against future betrayals. Never again would I be vulnerable to financial manipulation or pressure. The journey from victim to advocate wasn't linear. There were still days when anger resurfaced, when trust felt impossible, when the weight of familial rejection felt crushing. But these moments became less frequent and less intense as I built a life defined by my choices rather than my wounds. The most profound lesson emerged gradually. Family isn't defined by blood, but by behavior. The people who earned my trust, who respected my boundaries, who celebrated my successes without agenda, these became my true family. chosen, and cherished. 3 years after the theft, I received a formal letter from my parents' attorney. The court-ordered restitution was complete. The legal chapter of our story closed. I felt no triumph, no vindication, only a quiet relief that this chapter was finally finished. That evening, sitting on my balcony overlooking the Seattle skyline, I reflected on the transformation of the past 3 years. The betrayal had stripped away illusions, but had given me clarity in return. It had severed relationships, but created space for healthier connections. It had inflicted pain, but fostered resilience. The money they had taken was returned, but that was never what mattered most. What I gained was freedom from toxic expectations, from emotional manipulation, from the exhausting pursuit of approval that could never truly be earned. In the end, my parents had given me an unexpected gift, the permission to define family on my own terms, to build connections based on mutual respect rather than obligation, and to recognize that sometimes the healthiest choice is to walk away. Has your family ever betrayed your trust in a way that forced you to reevaluate the relationship? What boundaries have you established to protect yourself from toxic family dynamics? Share your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to choose their own well-being, even when family is involved. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, the family you choose can be stronger than the family you're born into.